It was a genuine pleasure to be part of the judging panel for Wired Health Startup Showcases last week. There were 6 participants that I wish to thank. Danielle from Ancora, Oliver from BIOS, Bea from See the Signs, Pete and Michael from Humanity, Mohammed from Mojo Fertility, and Ellen from Wild AI. All the startups are focused on really interesting things within the health tech space. Our judging criteria was focused on most innovative, most disruptive, and also how relevant is the problem that they are trying to solve in the marketplace today. It was a really difficult decision as to which company ticked the boxes the best. So I am delighted to announce that the winner of the Startup Showcase is BIOS. Congratulations. BIOS is focused on unlocking the potential of the nervous system in treating chronic disease through the use of AI in an effective, automated, and personalized way. Co-founded by Oliver Armitage and Emil Hewage, please welcome Oliver to explain more about the company, their mission statement, and future plans.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for making us the winner of the Wired Health Startup of the Year. I'm going to describe a little bit about what we're doing at BIOS using AI and neural interfaces for treating long-term diseases. I'm the co-founder and chief scientific officer. So I think everyone knows that chronic diseases are the major problem in healthcare. They're going to be, 40 trillion spending between now and 2030. They're going to be 86% of the year-on-year healthcare spending. And predominantly, they're just the major cause of death, including things like heart disease and diabetes. And so they represent the most significant problem in all of healthcare. And also, everyone knows that drug development is not really working to solve this so far. We've seen a lot of different speakers talk about the continual doubling cost of developing new therapeutics. And actually, when you start to look at some of those chronic diseases like cardiovascular disease, they're actually even more left behind that pace of development than some things like oncology. So at BIOS, we're using just a fundamentally different technology. We're using the nervous system. And we look at the neural messaging, so the signals being sent from your brain to your organs, and use those to start curing and treating chronic diseases. When we see the messages going from the brain to the organs, you can prevent the deterioration in health. Something that's, I think, not really taught in the way biology is expressed at school is that the organs don't function on their own. They're not single contained entities going about their day-to-day business. The organs are constantly being signaled what to do by your brain. Your brain is the central controller, and the peripheral nervous system is transmitting that information all throughout the body. If the genome and the protein sequences are the hard drive, the information storage, the nervous system is our internet. It moves information around the body to do real-time control of every single organ, whether it's the cardiovascular system, your lungs, your metabolic, so whether it's your diabetes and all kinds of diseases like that. And the reason that we can now work in this space, the reason this is now possible, is that neural interfaces, they're like the sequencing machines. And machine learning is what's allowing us to decode the base pairs. We're able to read the signals in real time as they go from the brain to an organ, understand what they mean by looking at long-term changes in organ function, and then start changing those signals in order to cause a therapeutic effect. And in doing so, you can electrically and in software, you can define a therapy. So at BIOS, that's what we do. We use machine learning to read and write neural data. And I'm going to take you through an example of that now. So here you're looking at how we interact with data coming off of one of our trials. I've got some data loaded in here from 2019. And if I go down to one of our experimental subjects and we look at a neural event called an orthostatic drop. An orthostatic drop is what happens when you stand up from a chair. So when you stand up, the blood pressure in your head goes down, and your brain and your heart respond to this by detecting this change, this drop in blood pressure, and then by signaling your heart to beat harder within the next second. So what you can see here in the bottom right is you can see that drop in blood pressure in one of our subjects. And then you can also see the body's response, which is this heart rate elevation in order to bring the blood pressure back up to a normal baseline. And what we can do at BIOS is we can look at the neural signal that is directly causing this natural response. When this response goes wrong, It's called postural hypertension. And what we've decoded here are neural biomarkers for hypertension. So what you can see here in this graph in the bottom right is a neural biomarker, which is the signal going from the heart up to the brain about a change in blood pressure. And this graph actually shows how that biomarker responds to different pulse pressures. So as you get different changes in blood pressure beat to beat. And we see that as the blood pressure goes outside of a normal range, so not higher than 50 millimeters of mercury, you start to see this neural signal respond. And if you can read that signal, as we can here, and then you can interfere with it in real time, you can start to treat someone's blood pressure, or you can start to treat their other diseases. And you could read more about this on the white paper, which is on our website, at the link which is below. So you could read more about our method of discovery of that biomarker and how you can use it. But what's important is that we can use this same mechanism, this same underlying technology, to discover the mechanism of a host of different diseases. As I said, the peripheral nervous system is controlling what your brain tells your cardiovascular system to do, but it's also controlling your respiratory system, it's controlling your metabolic system, it's controlling your bladder function. And so all of these diseases, you can discover things about their mechanism and discover new ways of treating them by using the nervous system. And so at BIOS, what we're doing at the moment is we're working on disease mechanism discovery. So we're doing that ourselves, first in cardiovascular, but we're also doing it with pharmaceutical and device partners who are looking at their own therapy areas. This can be used in chronic inflammation, can be used in diabetes. And then we combine that with sort of long-term patient outcome remote monitoring. We've taken advantage of the change in the healthcare system that's come about due to COVID. And we can do remote monitoring of patients with hypertension. We've got that running with a clinical trial right now. And we can combine that data with this like underlying neural mechanism to see how the nervous system is driving changes in disease. And what that means is that we can start building neural therapeutics. So digital signals which go into the nervous system to treat diseases. We're doing that ourselves in cardiovascular disease. Cardiovascular disease, as I mentioned earlier, is the most left behind of the chronic diseases in terms of pharmaceutical drug development. And it's the biggest killer, so it's the obvious one to go after. But ultimately, what's important here is that a single neural implant that's connected to the nervous system can offer thousands of possible treatments for lots of different diseases, whether they're cardiovascular or any of the other organs we've talked about. And what that means is that those treatments become software applications. You can start thinking about decoding, thinking of a control algorithm, and then changing a neural signal in order to control a disease. And you can do that in arthritis, which is fundamentally an inflammatory disorder. You can do it in diabetes, which is about glucose control and response, and part of that pathway is neurally controlled. And you can do it in cardiovascular disease, where everything about the heart is and blood vessel dilation is being controlled by the brain. And so once you can do that, you can think about deploying a change in therapeutic by just changing the software on a device which is controlling their nervous system. And this really is the big opportunity for the technology behind what people think of as brain-machine interfaces. The brain and the cortex is, people think about it for controlling limbs and learning remotely and these kind of like very emotive consumer applications. But when you look at the wealth of health information that your nervous system is controlling, it also has the ability to change the biggest driver in our current healthcare spending and the biggest driver in cause of death. So at BIOS, in summary, we use neural interfaces with machine learning. We decode them into these really unique neural biomarkers to allow us to understand health. And the really important thing is that you can then define a neural digital therapeutic, a drug therapeutic, in software and deliver it in software and treat some of the world's biggest chronic diseases. So I'd love to hear what people think about how you could use the nervous system to treat any kind of application.